I've fallen out of love with my partner after he told me he thinks his nephew is gay and wants to send him to military camp, but I'm scared that if I break up with him, the boy will be doomed. Posted by u/unique emergency 3407. 4 years ago, I, 35F, met Bob, 40M. Bob had recently become the guardian of his nephew Ben after the death of Ben's parents in a car accident. Ben was the same age as my son Jason, 11 at the time, now 15. At first, it seemed perfect. I was over the moon to have found a man who wasn't put off by the prospect of taking on a soon-to-be teenage stepson. Jason's father is not in the picture. Despite having very different personalities, the boys got along from the beginning, so Bob and Ben moved into my house in less than a year. Ben was always a quieter, more creative kid, whereas Jason is more athletic and boisterous. From the start, I got the sense that Bob understood Jason's way of being more than he did Ben's. At first, he would take them both to sports games, but Ben clearly had no interest, so before long, he just took Jason. At the time, it seemed like a natural choice. Ben was bored at the games, and Jason honestly reveled in having all of Bob's attention, but after that, things started unraveling. As they grew older, the differences between the boys became more obvious, their choices of clothing, hairstyle, friends, music, hobbies, etc., and so did Bob's preference. He started making little comments comparing them and encouraging Ben to be more like Jason. At first, it seemed like he was trying to be helpful, thinking that Jason's way of being was healthier, since he's more outgoing, has a more active social life, etc., based on Bob's own experiences. But after a while, there was a clear snideness that was impossible to ignore. My son has always had a strong protective streak and a sense of fairness, and despite their differences and the late age at which they were introduced, he and Ben are very close. So Jason's reaction to Bob's remarks favoring him was to take Ben's side. He stopped going to games with Bob and generally stopped liking him, and for a while, he became openly hostile on Ben's behalf. That stopped after he and Bob had a major argument. Jason backed down at that point because, as he told me, he realized that if he kept making himself unpleasant, Bob and I might break up, and in that case, Ben would have to leave too. Since then, with a few exceptions, he has been coldly civil. Meanwhile, Bob has come to believe that Ben is gay based on what I consider spurious evidence, not that it matters to me whether he is or not. He wanted to send him to a military-style reform school, and when I vetoed that, his behavior toward Ben escalated to a subtle kind of downright nastiness. Needless to say, all of this strained Bob's and my relationship to the breaking point, and then broke it. Seeing his ongoing behavior toward a child who needs him, I can no longer look at him with anything but disgust. The thought of him touching me makes my skin crawl, and I desperately want him out of my house. We're not married, and it's still in my sole name, thank God. But now I have the same problem Jason was worried about. If I end the relationship and kick Bob out, Ben will have to go too, since legally, I have no tie to him whatsoever. He's 15 now, and although he has borne everything by stoically ignoring Bob, I can't in good conscience let that man be solely responsible for him. For what it's worth, I have always tried to stand up for him and get Bob to see that there are many types of boys in the world, and all of them are equally valid. Not to mention, I don't think Jason would ever forgive me if I did. I would happily take guardianship of Ben if I could. Even if Bob made no financial contribution, we could manage if we cut back on luxuries. My concern is that I'm far from sure Bob would agree. However he personally feels about Ben is still his flesh and blood, and Bob feels strongly about that. To be honest, I think it's part of the reason he resents Ben so much. Ben is the last of the line and isn't turning out the way Bob thinks his family should be represented. If I were to start a conversation along those lines and Bob refused to allow Ben to stay, it would be incredibly difficult to walk that back. The idea of having to continue playing his supportive wife to stop him from leaving on his own for another 2.5 years, until Ben turns 18, sounds like a nightmare, but the alternative is worse. What is the best way to manage and get through this? Relevant comments. Commenter. Talk to Bob and let him know you want to legally adopt Ben. It's probably wise not to mention that it's for breakup custody insurance. Just say that you've really come to see him as family, and both boys as your sons, and you want to make it official. If Bob agrees, you'll have some leverage for custody. Also, you aren't morally obligated to be in a sexual relationship with someone you dislike just to stay in Ben's life. That's not a fair requirement. I know you're worried the boys will be mad at you or hate you, including your son Jason. But if and when you break up with Bob, I'd talk to Jason honestly, one-on-one. Tell him that you love Ben, want to look out for him, and stay in his life as much as possible. Explain that you've been staying in the relationship for a while for that reason, but you've reached the point where you just can't keep being with a man you don't see as a good person. I would hope that Jason, who you say is naturally protective, will understand and be protective of you, his own mother, if you show him your feelings and good intentions, rather than condemn you for not sacrificing yourself. I very much doubt your son would expect that of you. None of us expect that of you. As for Ben, if you break up and Bob won't allow you any custody, talk to Ben about it. Tell him you love him, see him as a son, and that the way Bob treats him is wrong, and why you don't respect Bob. Make sure Ben knows he has done nothing wrong and that you very much want to stay a part of his life. Let him know you will try to do so as much as Bob allows, but given the current situation, things are uncertain. You'll be talking to a lawyer. And if nothing else, Ben should know that he's always welcome to move back in the minute he turns 18. Ops response. Thank you for saying that. You are right, I know Jason would understand if I explained it to him. I think my real problem is that if something happened to Ben, I would have a hard time forgiving myself. At the moment, I'm hoping it won't come to either of those situations. The comments here have given me some hope, and I am going to speak to a lawyer about our options. Update 1 month 1 week later. Hi again, everyone. I posted about my family problem about a month ago and was bowled over by the number of kind and extremely helpful comments I received. Someone requested an update, so I'm posting now to share what's happened since. To be honest, it's also to unburden myself. The boys are really sweet, but I obviously can't talk to them about these things, and there aren't many people in my life with whom I feel comfortable sharing all the details. I suppose I'm embarrassed. The week after my original post, I met with a family lawyer I know to go over my options. I actually wrote down the legal suggestions posted here to discuss with her, but unfortunately, after going over each one, along with several others in detail, we had to conclude that while some might technically be feasible, they would either take too long to be practical or require things from Bob or Ben that, for various reasons, were not ideal. Following the meeting, I spent some time reflecting and decided to take a long, hard look at our finances to see what might be affordable as a compromise, such as sending Ben to a good boarding school and paying tuition upfront so that if I later left Bob, it would be easier and cheaper for him to keep Ben there rather than move him to a different school. Anyway, I went over our financial records with a fine-tooth comb, and that's when I discovered that Bob had been cheating on me for the entirety of our relationship. It turns out that, prior to Ben's parents' death, Bob had been about to move in with another woman. This woman didn't want kids, so when Bob was suddenly faced with taking custody of Ben or seeing him placed in foster care, she made it clear she would not be involved. For the record, I can't say I blame her, I love my boys with all my heart, but asking someone who never wanted kids to parent a bereaved 11-year-old she has never met is not in anyone's best interests, in my opinion. When I confronted him about the affair, he didn't even attempt to deny it. He seemed ashamed and just asked what happened next. So I told him that next, he was going to get his stuff and get out of my house, but first, he had to ask Ben if he wanted to go or stay because it wouldn't be fair to disrupt the poor kid's life any further. Ben quickly said he preferred to stay, and Bob seemed, frankly, relieved. He moved out that weekend, and I haven't seen him since. We've been in touch by text to discuss financial arrangements, though, and last week he sent me money to cover Ben's basic expenses, nothing close to child support, but under the circumstances, I'll take it and be glad. From his attitude, I take it that he's seeing this as a long-term thing, but even if he doesn't, according to the family lawyer, his leaving Ben with me, even for a while, along with Ben's age and the fact that Bob is his guardian rather than his father, would make it easier to build a case for Ben to stay, even if Bob does try to fight it. The lawyer is confident that such a battle could be won, or at least dragged out until Ben is 18 and it doesn't matter anymore. So that, as you can imagine, has been an enormous relief. That makes it that much harder to admit that finding out about Bob has still hit me hard. The fact is that, even though I was absolutely done with him and wanted him out, there was a time I truly believed he wanted to be with me and that we could build a life together. I knew our relationship wasn't a romance for the ages or anything like that, but it was by far the best I'd had since before my son was born, and I really thought we cared for and valued one another. Now I realize that all he ever wanted from me was a mother for Ben. He as good as admitted it, and in retrospect, it makes complete sense. That's why he never wanted to get married or buy into my house, even though I offered, though now, of course, I am grateful, because he wanted to make it as easy as possible to split from me once Ben was old enough to no longer require my services. I think it might even explain why he was so hard on Ben and grasping at straws for a reason to send him away. I never expected it of him based on what else I knew, or I never would have been with him, but if he was blaming Ben for getting in the way of his life and simultaneously feeling guilty for it, that could turn a mild-mannered person mean, I think. Maybe he even thought that if Ben was away most of the time, the other woman would be willing to compromise for a few years? I don't know. I've even been wondering whether he decided to pursue me before we'd even met. The boys met first through an extracurricular where they became friends. It's possible that Jason mentioned my being single in passing, allowing Bob to identify me as potentially suitable before we ever met. I'm sorry this is such a mopey post. I truly am grateful for the way things worked out. I think it's the best possible solution for everyone under the circumstances and not one I could have achieved without Bob's help. And the boys have been wonderful. They didn't know I was trying to get Bob out anyway, so they've been treating me very gently, or as gently as you can expect teenage boys to be, anyway, and trying to pretend they aren't thrilled Bob is gone when I'm in the room. I'm glad of that, to be honest. I'm so grateful he's gone and that Ben is still safe here with us. I just need a bit of time to really remember it, I think. Relevant comments. Commenter. Bob may not have chosen you to be his partner, but Ben chose you to be his mom. That's a testament not only to what a crappy human your ex is but also to what a wonderful person you must be for that child, who has lost everyone, to have chosen you. I hope things get better soon for you and your boys.